Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a really iconic pedal for bass players. It's that little metallic purple box, the MXR M82 bass envelope filter.
Yeah, this one really made waves. It's definitely more than just another stomp box, you know? It kind of set the standard for modern bass filtering.
Right. And our goal today, our mission, is to really unpack the source material, figure out how this M82 managed to connect that, like, vintage analog funk sound.
That warm, squishy stuff.
Exactly. With the precision needed for modern recording and playing, and crucially, how it tackled that age-old problem, losing your low end when you kick in a filter.
Okay, so setting the scene. The M82, it lands in 2011. And that timing's important, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just MXR throwing something out there randomly. Jim Dunlop, they were making a really focused push, a strategic move into the bass effects world.
Absolutely. This wasn't a one-off. It came out with some heavy hitters, the M80 Bass DI Plus N, the M87 Bass Compressor, the M288 Bass Octave Deluxe, big foundational pedals.
So MXR was basically saying, okay, bass players, we get it. We're building gear for you, gear that respects those low frequencies.
Precisely. And the whole idea behind the M82, the design philosophy, was getting that studio-level performance headroom clarity.
But keeping the vibe.
Keeping the vibe.
Yeah.
That expressive analog filter sound. They wanted the precision, but without sounding cold or digital.
And that's the tricky part, right? That balance.
Yeah.
Precision versus warmth.
That's totally the tightrope it walks and why it worked so well. You know, most guitar filters, you put a bass through them and the fundamental tone just vanishes. This was built from the ground up for bass.
Okay, so let's imagine we crack open that purple casing.
Wow.
What's the core circuit? We know it's analog. Uses a voltage-controlled filter, a VCF topology. What does that actually mean for the player?
Well, the VCF, the voltage-controlled filter, that's kind of the classic heart of analog synths and filters. It means the filter sweep, that wah or quack sound, it's controlled by a voltage signal. And in this case, that voltage is generated by how hard you play, your dynamics. That's what gives it that classic, warm, responsive, kind of squishy analog feel.
Sounds like a lot of vintage filters, though. So what was the specific MXR magic here? The thing that made it work for bass without killing the low end?
Right. The key innovation, the thing that really sets it apart, is that dual filter path. You see it right there with the dry and the FX knobs. It's all about the mix.
Oh, okay.
See, older filters, they just ran your entire signal through the filter sweep. Lows, mids, highs, everything. So when that filter swept upwards, cutting lows to emphasize the peak.
Your fundamental frequency just disappears. You get the cool effect, but you vanish from the mix.
Exactly that thin, hollow sound. The M82 fixes this because it lets you blend the filtered signal, the wet sound, with your completely clean, unaffected dry signal.
So you keep the foundation.
You keep the foundation. That powerful low-end note stays solid, and you layer the filter effect, the expressive part, right over it. No more low-end collapse. It was a huge deal.
And the sources talk about the specific character of the M82's filter. It's mainly a low-pass filter. Why is that choice important for bass?
That's a really good point. Lots of older filters, especially maybe guitar-focused ones, they might use bandpass or even high-pass filtering to make that mid-range sweep really pop.
But that cuts the lows by definition.
Right. It inherently removes the very frequencies that make a bass sound like a bass, the stuff you feel. By designing the M82 as a low-pass filter, MXR made sure those deep fundamentals are always there. The sweep happens on the harmonics above that, giving you the vowel-like sounds without gutting the tone.
Plus, it's dynamic and predictable, which, if you're playing live, is, well, essential.
Totally. There's an internal circuit, a voltage follower that tracks your playing intensity, just your dynamics. That's what controls the filter sweep. No external triggers or anything complicated.
Simple and effective.
And crucially, they built it tough. Wide headroom, low noise floor. You can slam it with an active bass, a hot signal from synth pedals, even a 5-string. It stays clean. And it's true bypass, naturally. Standard 9V power. Built for the gigging bassist.
Okay, so that solid bass, that architecture, gives us the platform. But the real magic, the way you shape the sound, comes down to those 5 knobs on the front. Understanding those is key, right?
Absolutely. Those 5 knobs, you can think of them as controlling 3 stages. Setting the trigger, shaping the sound of the filter itself, and then blending it all together.
Let's start with the trigger then, the sensitivity knob. How does that work? How does it decide when the effect kicks in?
Sensitivity sets the threshold, basically how responsive the filter is. Turn it up high, and even if you play really softly, the filter's going to open up. You get that effect on almost every note.
Okay, good for consistent effect.
Yeah. Or if you set it low, you really have to dig in. You need to hit the string harder to make the filter wake up and start sweeping. Gives you more dynamic control over when the effect happens.
Right. So once it is triggered, how do we shape that sweep, that wah character? That's the Q knob.
That's Q, yeah. Or resonance. Think of it as the sharpness or the peakiness of the filter. Low Q gives you a gentler, more subtle sweep. It integrates more smoothly.
Less in your face.
Exactly. But as you turn the Q up, that peak gets sharper, more pronounced. You get that really vocal, talking wah kind of sound, more dramatic.
And the M82 handles high Q settings well. Some analog filters get crazy loud.
That's another clever bit of design. Even when you push the Q high on the M82, it manages the level internally. You don't get those massive, unpredictable volume spikes that can make other vintage-style filters really hard to use live. It stays controlled.
Okay, Q sets the peak shape. Then there's the timing. How long does that wah last? That's decay.
Decay is all about duration. How fast does the filter close back down after your initial attack triggers it? Set the decay low, turn it counterclockwise.
Fast decay.
Right. You get a really quick, punchy quack that cuts off almost immediately. That's your classic funk sound, like think Bootsy Collins. Short, sharp, percussive.
And the other way, high decay.
High decay, turning it clockwise, means the filter closes much more slowly. You get a long, smooth, sweeping effect. Think synth-bass sounds, long, evolving notes in fusion, that kind of thing. It sustains the sweep.
Trigger, shape, timing. And then we get back to what you said was the M82's real genius, the mix section, dry and FX.
Yep, the independent level controls. Dry is simply the volume of your clean, unaffected bass tone, your fundamental. FX is the volume of the filtered sound, the sweep we just shaped with sensitivity, Q, and decay.
And finding the right balance is crucial.
It's everything, especially live. The sources consistently mention that for clarity and punch in a band mix, a lot of players find that sweet spot around 50-50, maybe dry slightly higher sometimes.
So you get the cool effect, but you never lose your place.
Exactly. You maintain that solid low-end foundation with the dry signal, and the FX signal cuts through with the expressive filter sound, usually sitting nicely in the mids and upper mids.
Now, here's something interesting the sources mentioned about the design. That 5-knob layout. It wasn't totally new for MXR bass gear, was it?
No, and that was apparently quite deliberate. Smart design, really. The M82's control layout sensitivity, Q, decay, dry, FX, it's almost identical to the EQ section on the M81 bass preamp.
Ah, okay, familiarity.
Right. If you were already using their preamp, maybe you already had an M80 DI+8, you look at the M82 and you instantly kind of get how it works. Less guesswork, faster integration into your setup, clever ecosystem thinking from MXR.
Okay, so let's make this practical for listeners. Give us some typical settings. If I want that iconic Bootsy Collins funk vibe, what am I dialing in?
Okay, for that classic tight funk quack, you want sharpness and speed, so crank the Q up quite high, maybe around 3 o'clock. Then set a fast decay, maybe around 11 o'clock, so it closes quickly.
And sensitivity.
Sensitivity needs to be high enough so it triggers easily with your playing style, probably above noon. Dry and FX, maybe around noon to 1 o'clock each. Find that blend. Sharp, percussive, doesn't hang around.
Cool. What about the opposite? Something really slow and spacey, like a modern synth sweep.
Right. For that long, evolving sound, you slow it right down. Max out the decay or get it close, like 3 o'clock or higher. Keep the sensitivity fairly high so it triggers easily on sustained notes.
And the Q.
You might actually pull the Q back a bit, maybe to around 1 o'clock. This makes the long sweep smoother, less peaky or vocal, more like a synth filter opening and closing slowly. Blend dry and FX to taste, maybe favoring the effects slightly more for this kind of sound.
And what if you just wanted to add a little bit of movement, something subtle? A subtle groove enhancer.
Yeah, dial everything back. Keep all the main controls, sensitivity, Q, decay, somewhere around noon, maybe even slightly lower, like 10 or 11 o'clock. The key here is the mix. Keep the dry level strong, maybe slightly above noon, and bring the FX level up just enough to add that subtle lift or chew to the notes without dominating. It just moves with your playing.
Makes sense. So that control, that predictability, that explains why it caught on so fast. But the envelope filter market, I mean, it's crowded.
Right.
Where did the M82 really carve out its space compared to the competition?
That's a really important question for context, right? Why'd this one over, say, something like an Electro-Harmonix Qtron, which is legendary in its own right?
Yeah, let's start there. The M82 versus the Qtron, vintage versus, well, modern vintage.
Sort of. The Qtron is that definitive vintage funk sound for many. It's got this wild, organic, sometimes unpredictable thing going on, which is cool, but it can have huge volume jumps when that filter peak hits hard.
Yeah, I've heard that can be tough live.
Exactly. And its sensitivity can be really finicky, needing adjustments maybe between songs or depending on the room. The M82, by comparison, it just behaves. It's cleaner. The volume is managed internally. It's way more predictable and, frankly, safer for live use. It brought that funk sound into a reliable package.
Okay, what about compared to other high-end analog filters, like the M82 That gets a lot of love too.
The discombobulator is known for being incredibly smooth, very musical, but generally its focus tends to be a bit more on the mid-range character of the bass filter sweep. It sounds great, but the M82, partly because of that specific low-pass tuning and especially that dry blend,
It keeps more bottom end intact.
it feels like it retains more of that fundamental weight underneath the effect. It feels thicker, maybe less overtly mid-focus than the Emma, while still being really articulate.
So the M82 found this sweet spot. Vintage analog feel, but with modern control. And crucially, that low-end preservation thanks to the blend.
Nailed it. It hit that perfect middle ground, and players noticed immediately. The reception was fantastic. People praised the headroom, the lack of tone suck when bypassed, and again, that ability to keep the low end strong, even with really resonant cue settings.
And it wasn't just funk players jumping on it.
No, not at all. It became essential in modern R&B rigs, fusion setups, electronic music, anywhere you needed controlled. Expressive filtering on bass without sacrificing the core tone.
And you see it on the boards of some massive players. The sources mentioned Juan Alderete, Victor Wooten, Thundercat. Why would someone like Thundercat, who uses incredibly complex effects chains, go for the M82 instead of maybe something more boutique or digital?
I think it comes back to predictability and that reliable mix. When you're playing at that level, especially through huge PA systems or complex studio setups, you cannot have a filter pedal suddenly jump in volume or disappear from the mix.
Consistency is king.
Absolutely. The M82's controlled response and that rock-solid dry-wet blend mean the effect sits exactly where you put it, sonically. It doesn't fight you. It's a professional tool for high-pressure situations, studio or stage. It just works reliably.
That totally makes sense. Okay, let's try and wrap up its legacy then. What are the main takeaways? The lasting impact of the M82?
Okay, 4 key things really stand out from the sources. First, it fundamentally changed how people thought about bass-friendly filter design. It proved you could have that expressive filter sound work across genres, not just locked into funk.
Yep.
It made it more universally applicable.
By making it practical, essentially.
Exactly. Which leads to the second point, that blended dry effects control. It successfully and reliably solved that core problem of low-end loss that had plagued bassists using filters for decades. That was huge.
And solving that made it viable for more players.
Right. Third point is precision, the headroom, the predictability. It took the envelope filter from being maybe a quirky effect, a bit of a novelty sometimes, and turned it into a serious, reliable tool for professional live and studio work.
It professionalized the bass envelope filter, in a way.
You could say that. And the final point, number 4, loops back to the beginning. The M82's success was a major factor in cementing MXR's position as a dominant force in the bass effects market through the 2010s. It was a cornerstone of that successful bass lineup.
Wow. That's quite a story for one little purple pedal. So the central idea we've distilled here is really about that marriage. Dynamic analog warmth the sound players crave, combined with that precise dry-wet mix. That's the M82's genius, making the filter usable without losing the bass.
Perfectly put. And just to leave you with something to think about, the sources mentioned something intriguing about what might have come next.
Oh, go on.
Apparently, the M82's circuit design directly inspired a prototype called the Bass Envelope Deluxe. It was never released, but the interesting thing is, it was reportedly exploring dual sweep behavior.
Dual sweep, like 2 filters moving at once.
Potentially, yeah. Maybe independent sweeps or interacting sweeps. Who knows exactly what they were working on. But the M82 really mastered that predictable, controllable, single sweep filter. It gave bassists precise command over the classic quack.
So the thought is,
if the M82 unlocked the potential of the single sweep by making it precise and mixable, what kind of new sounds, what unexplored musical textures could a truly successful, widely adopted dual sweep bass filter open up? What would that next evolution sound like? Something to ponder.
definitely something to think about.
Okay.
Until next time, keep digging into your gear.